Good morning. Mr. Homan, we actually agree on a couple of things, and that is there is zero comparison between the Trump and Biden administration. And yes, the Congress, this country, and the Constitution have a history of racism, and we are dealing with the ramifications of that to this day. Need I remind you of Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution that states people who looked like me were considered 3/4 of a free individual for determining congressional representation. Or maybe I should remind you of the Civil War, which I know some folks on the other side of the aisle want to say it was about states' rights, but it was ultimately about slavery. And while some want to paint slavery as a workforce development or job training program of sorts that somehow benefited Black people, that's not the case. So for the people who were not packed up on ships and would like to get to this country legally through immigration, let's talk about that. The immigration system President Biden inherited has been broken for a very long time. In the words of President Biden, our problems at the border didn't arise overnight, and they're not going to be solved overnight. Extreme Republicans have a choice. They can keep using immigration to try to score political points, or they can help solve the problem. With congressional Republicans unwilling to come to the table and have meaningful conversations about solutions, President Biden has limited options to broadly address concerns in the immigration system. At every turn, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have rejected President Biden's funding authorization and supplemental requests to confront our immigration challenges. The Biden-Harris administration requested $3.5 billion to secure the southern border with additional holding facilities and funding for 2,000 new asylum officers. That was rejected. On day one, the Biden-Harris administration sent Congress comprehensive immigration reform legislation to constrain illegal immigration, strengthen and support legal immigration, protect our dreamers and seasonal workers, and so much more. That was rejected too. And now the Biden-Harris administration is asking for congressional action to defend our law enforcement and address illegal crossings at the southern border through President Biden's supplemental national security funding requests. Unfortunately, House Republican leadership are rejecting the offer negotiated by President Biden, a bipartisan coalition of senators outright, despite not even having all the details. But even without having meaningful action by House Republicans, President Biden has taken a strong, substantial, significant steps to curb illegal immigration and address problems at the southern border. So, Mr. Beer, what specifically will President Biden's supplemental funding request do to stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. and combat human trafficking?
Look, what they're proposing is to put more resources into our ports of entry. And really that's where you see fentanyl coming into the country. More than 90% is seized at ports of entry. They say, well, that's because it's all magically getting by the Border Patrol agents. Well, Border Patrol agents arrest millions of people. We have a huge sample size to draw from, to draw conclusions about who's coming between ports of entry. And they're not bringing fentanyl. They're not bringing drugs there. They're coming through ports of entry, and we know this, and they're hiring American citizens to do it because it's very easy to conceal fentanyl in legal luggage, in legal baggage, and legal travel. And so it's a whole misdirection to focus on. Look, I would want Border Patrol to be completely freed up to scan every nook and cranny for people smuggling fentanyl if we let people come into this country legally. That would be a great thing for the Border Patrol, and it'd be a great thing for the country, too.
Thank you. And Mr. Beer, in your testimony, you talked about efforts to rebuild a functioning system when it comes to our country's immigration policies. Can you speak to how Biden's administration has been supporting these policies?
Look, the Biden administration has done more than any other administration in our history to try to think creatively about how to address illegal immigration through lawful channels. Congress gave them the parole authority. They are using parole authority legally on a case-by-case basis to allow people to apply to enter this country legally, whether it's at ports of entry, where they're mandated by Congress to deal with asylum seekers at ports of entry. They're doing it through a CBP1 app. That's a great process, as well as through the parole sponsorship programs where we Americans get to sponsor someone to come and make sure that they're handled in a legal and orderly way.
Thank you. My time has expired.
Lady